espacio de reflexión sobre la función de la cultura cinematográfica y teatral en la vida contemporánea. Voces, Cátedra, Ingmar Bergman.
Look, I started as an actor. I went to mime school. I studied at Lecoq. I started acting when I was 8. I acted in my own company in Indonesia. I stopped acting at about 21 because I had ideas of stories to tell. I don't know if I would direct myself. I think that that's very difficult to do. Some actors do it. But in a way, you become too self-conscious. I would act in something with a director that I believe in so that I can forget myself and play the part.
Taymor nace en 1952 en Estados Unidos. Es una artista multimedia, directora de cine, ópera y musicales de Broadway. Inicia sus estudios teatrales a los 10 años en el Boston Children's Theatre. A los 20 años trabaja con su compañía de teatro en Indonesia, en donde las danzas rituales crean una marca en su trabajo. Este estilo se aprecia en musicales como El Rey León o La Flauta Mágica. Julie Taymor destaca por su riqueza musical, estética y vasto colorido.
I was 21 years old when I found myself living in Indonesia. I had graduated from Oberlin College. I had been in a theater company for many years. I had done theater. But now I was in a place where theater was the most profound and dominant art form. There was very little, it was a long time ago. There was very little film, television, and all the theater was very localized in villages. I had been living there 2 years and performing with various Javanese, Balinese, masked dancers and actors, but now I was on a journey up in Bali and a lake by the volcano where there was a ceremony that happened every 4 years for the initiation of the young men into the village. And I found myself in a square, a dark square in this village. There was no electricity, there was only the full moon. And I was under a big banyan tree. You have those trees here, beautiful banyan tree with the roots into the ground. And I was listening to the various gamelons, the orchestras that came from the various villages to come to this ceremony for the young men. And I thought I was alone in the darkness, just listening. And all of a sudden, at one end of this square, lit by only moonlight, I could see light bouncing off mirrors. And then I could see that it was 20 old men in full warrior costume with these hats, in complete costumes with spears coming out of the darkness. And there was no audience, and they didn't see me. I was hidden in the shadows of the tree. I watched these old men stand up straight and perform a barras dance with the voices emanating from their bellies. These incredible voices. And I sat there, having been in theater my entire life since I was 11 years old, I sat mesmerized as I watched this beautiful art form and thought, who is this for? Who are these men performing for? Why is this costume so elaborate? Where is the audience? And I was amazed to think that these men were performing for some spirit within and without. This experience for me was so seminal, so important to my existence, to my being as a creator, as a theater artist, and just as a human being, to see that there could be that kind of perfection, intentional perfection and devotion and creation without reviews, without money, without praise, but just for it. So that experience has lived with me, even right to yesterday or tomorrow with the El Rey León. And this is something that, as a young artist your age, I experienced in those years that I was in Indonesia, and I was there 4 years, and I started a theater company after that day. When I start a play, or a movie, or an opera, I look to find the essential image, and I call that an ideograph. How do you reduce the film or the story of the play to one visual or conceptual image? In the play of the Tempest, I thought that I would use at the very beginning a sand castle, because the idea of having a castle out of sand is in a way what Shakespeare is talking about, the ephemeralness of civilization. You know, in that big opening boat sequence in The Tempest itself, it doesn't matter that there's a king. Above the king is nature. So the idea that the first image would be Miranda building a sand castle on this black rake stage, black sand stage. And then in the theater, because in the theater we can have poetry, so we are allowed to see the puppeteers dressed in black. They came up on the top of the stage where the sandcastle was, and they took their watering cans and they started to water this sandcastle. Through lighting, I was able to first show the whole technique and then only show the water. In theater, we are able to do that, where we see the technical and then we forget about it. Now going to making movie of this, I thought, well, I love that idea, but it's a theater idea. How do I take a theater idea and put that in a film idea? We can't show the people with the watering cans. We're in a real island. We're on Hawaii. So the opening of this film, you might have seen it for a moment. It starts with a sandcastle. So if we're on a close-up of this sandcastle, it looks huge at the beginning of the movie. The camera pulls away, and we realize the sandcastle is in the hand of Miranda. So I use cinematic technique to tell the story. She has created it. It's in a human hand, and then the storm begins, and it really begins to rain, and it washes out of her hands. So I had the same idea of what nature versus nurture, what the struggle in The Tempest is about, but I found a theatrical way in the theater and a cinematic way in the movie to do the same concept, which is the ideograph, the reducing, the abstraction of the play down to this simple concept.
I have made you mad.
Now, talking about The Lion King, this, again, working with I directed and designed the costumes and co-designed puppets and masks, but I had a very good set designer work with me. And again, in directing your designers, you still, as a director, have to think, well, what is that ideograph? What, if I were to reduce El Rey León to one image, what would it be? The circle. You all know the circle of life. And so the idea of the circle came from first of all, that song and the concept that we must go home again. The whole story is about a circle. And then instead of having Pride Rock look like it does in the film, we decided it would come and circle around. In the original production, it circles out of the earth. Then you have the circle of Mufasa's mask. Then, most dominantly, you have the whole musical begin with the sunrise, which is the circle coming in there. So this notion of taking a play or a movie or an opera and trying to find its essence is how I work in all of my work, is to find that ideograph. And then it repeats itself throughout, symbolically, it repeats itself. There is an image in The Lion King of gazelles that are pushed across the stage on bicycle wheels. It's a carriage, you might have seen it. But again, it allows the animals to move up and down, but it also supports this theme of the circle, which is, I think, in music you do it all the time, it's the recurring motif. So I do it with image and also concept in all of my work. First, when you're directing theater, you should do what theater does best. And I don't think you should try and imitate film. So this idea of how many trees do you need on the stage to build a forest, again, I can use a Lion King very easily because you might have a chance to see it. There is a part of Lion King where there is a drought. Everything is bad in the second act, and all the trees are dying, and the rivers are dying. And how many trees? I looked at the animated film and I went, oh my God, how am I going to do this? There's cracking earth over here, and rivers drying up there, and trees dying, leaves falling. But back to the circle, because I left this one out. The way we do the drought, is a circle of silk is on the stage, and it's blue. And via lighting, it turns slightly gray, and it's pulled, there's a hole underneath that circle of silk, and someone downstairs, underneath the stage, pulls the silk, and the audience watches a circle disappear. The audience is smart enough, and that is the point of the theater, is that you ask the audience to participate, to use their imagination. They know they're not in Africa. They know that they are in a theater. They suspend, that great expression, they suspend their disbelief. They don't need green screen or blue screen. They don't need that kind of reality. So you should, that poetry of theater is its plus. The humanity aspect of that, the tactile feeling of theater, that it's silk and sticks, not of projection, not trying to be real, and yet, again, that is the humanity, because we know somebody off stage is pulling it up. You see the strings. You don't pretend it's anything but silk and sticks, and that's the spirit I'm talking about. That is the origin of the theater.
Desde 1980, Julie Taymor realizó, junto a Elliot Goldenthal, una gran cantidad de producciones teatrales originales. En 1992 incursiona en la ópera, montando la obra Edipo Rey de Igor Stravinsky, y más adelante triunfa en el cine con películas como Titus, de 1999, o Across the Universe, del 2007.
The mask. Well, one thing about masks is that anybody can be anything. It's an opportunity to tell any kind of story. Like Juan Darien is a story where if you didn't use masks and puppets, how would you tell this transforming tale? It actually gives you more freedom in using the masks and puppets. The power of the mask is coming way back to the origin of theater. It's the shaman. The first actor ever was a shaman, and in every culture it's called something different. In Indonesia, it's a dukun. In South Africa, it's sangoma. And many, many cultures I'm sure you have here, you put on the mask, the shaman who takes care of the community, to take a journey, a spirit journey into the darkness. And by putting the mask, you go inside. And we use masks because it allows us to tell incredible stories that we couldn't do just with a 5'6" person. Oedipus Rex, which you saw some imagery of, when Stravinsky and Cocteau created this opera, they didn't want it to just be human beings singing, because they wanted the story, the Greek story of Oedipus Rex, to be performed by larger-than-life. They wanted masks. They wanted larger-than-life emblematic characters. So he instructed all directors, they instructed them to use masks. Now, when I did Oedipus Rex, I didn't want to put a mask on front of J.C. Norman's face, nor would you really want to put a mask on an opera singer, because it really, in a way, it changes how they sing. So that's the first time where I put the mask on the head, before Lion King, on the head of the performer. But I didn't duplicate the face of the performer. I allowed the face of the singer to be the emotion of the music, but the mask was emblematic of the state of being. Well, it's very different working in something like Titus Andronicus, which doesn't really have masks. There's moments, but it's not about masks. The idea of the ideograph is, I use that for actors as well. So for instance, if you were to take Titus Andronicus's life, what is the most profound image that constantly comes to your mind? And it's the hand. The hand. Because in a position of power, the hand is about power. He puts in one of the first scenes, you'll see Hopkins put the hand on Lavinia's head as he blesses her. Later, you know, his hand will be chopped off, and it will be held in the mouth of Lavinia. And you will see a giant hand in the parts of the scenic design that are from Rome. So it will be with each character also to find those essential things that represent them. It's much harder to talk about that because you kind of have to be in it as an actor and look for the material, but I work in that way with or without masks. I will find what that is, what that physicality is, which will help their interior. And it's a two-way street. It's from inside to outside and outside to inside, because we all know that how you dress changes how you feel as an actor. So I think that, you know, we know that costume, any of that can really help a character. It's not just about, does it look pretty, is it right? It actually represents the character themselves. Mm-hmm. In Titus, costume was very much about that. Color, costume. You see Alan Cummings and what he wears, and he looks like he's out of the Mussolini era. I mix time. I didn't say it's just one time, whereas Andronicus, Titus, you watch him from the very beginning be a warrior in metal, and by the end he's wearing a chef's out, which is dark, black and dark and gray, and he goes through 4 or 5 different changes. The second to last, he's wearing a gray sweater. He's lost all his power. The sweater is too long, it's hanging like that over his hands, and at the very end he has refound himself as a chef, and he's in white, in the chef's uniform. So even in the selection of color choice, of costume, of language, of physical movement, you can get to the essence of the character. The idea of poor theater is rich theater. I think what people always get confused, they think, okay, you spend a lot of money on these various shows. Some shows require, some shows don't. But the idea of minimalism works no matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter at all. I'll give you one example of something I learned when I was in Japan. It's the no theater, the Japanese no theater. If you wear a kimono and you raise your arm to a certain point, if you raise it this far, the kimono will crease. It'll wrinkle. So how you raise it from here to here is all the art. That's all of it. He or she who can move the arm and fill it with power and imagination, that's great. When you raise it like this, you failed. So in a way, the restriction and how you fill those restrictions is really the power, is really the excitement. Can you take a puppet, like a shadow puppet, a leather shadow puppet, and through just flipping it around back and forth, make the audience feel that it's full of life, that it's full of character? So that's, again, I learned that a long time ago. I learned that on my journeys to the Far East, to Asia, and those kinds of lessons. And I think traveling and putting yourself into dangerous, difficult, uncomfortable situations is where you really grow as an artist. That's the playing with fire part of my life, which is you can't transform if you stay with things that are comfortable. You can't. You have to actually challenge yourself in situations where it forces you to think and see differently. I think the thing about as a theater or film director and dealing with violence is to think about point of view. So I'm going to tell you a story about how we had to put music down on one scene, which you didn't see here. The scene is a very horrific scene in Titus Andronicus. It's in the play. It's when the two boys, the young men, take Titus's daughter Lavinia, and they're going to rape her. They're going to take her clothes off. They kill her husband in front of her, and they torment her. The queen, Tamara, and the two boys torment this girl, and she begs to have herself killed because for her to be raped is, the dishonor, as we know in many cultures of rape, is worse than death. So in films, if many of you make films, before the final music is put on, you often do a temporary score. And we put music onto this very dizzying scene that was shot with Steadicam, where we're moving with the boys around this actress, around Lavinia. And we put a very heavy rock beat down. And it worked like gangbusters. And whose point of view do you think we had? It was very much the boys. They were having fun. And the music, the rock music, and if you think about every single movie you've seen, what is under the scene of violence? It's a heavy beat and it's rock music. And Elliot looked at it after he put that down and he said, we can't do that. It was his music, but we can't do that. So he wrote the score from Lavinia's point of view, and it became a dizzying string quartet. And all of a sudden, the scene completely changed because the audience now was being in the action from the female point of view. It was not fun at all. In fact, it was absolutely horrifying and really dizzying and completely changed the story.
Beastly creatures! Confusion falls!
And I think that we don't talk enough about that, the aspect that whether it's a Tarantino film or any other, because he's kind of the master and people love it and it's enjoyable and he's a great artist, but those things do make violence fun and sexy. And that is one of the issues. You really have to decide, what do you want from your film? If you're out there to make a violent film because you want the audience to buy tickets and have a better time, then go ahead. Put that kind of music on. But don't pretend it's a film against violence, because it isn't. When you have real hardship, and though I'm successful, everybody goes through their Spider-Mans, everybody has their moments of exaltation, which I had on that, and then difficulty. And there is a moment where you just have to say, where am I heading? Let's keep our eyes going there. There's a lot of wind, a lot of chatter, especially in this day and age with the internet, with the blogging, with the pressure, with all of this. And if you have your comrades there, your collaborators, and that's the most important lesson for me, is who are you working with? Because through the dark times, people have to stay with you and you have to stay focused. And if you're there, you can make it. But what I had experienced is like that scar. It's the scar that makes you know that you can do it. And that is not something you do alone. You do it with comrades, you do it with collaborators, but still you as the artist have to keep that line of knowing, where did we want to go? Are we on that same trajectory, or have we moved elsewhere? And then there are decisions you have to make, and sometimes they work out and sometimes they don't. But they always do in a way.